This thing can be slow, but it's not bad. This thing's an absolute hoot, but the body, do you know, I just realized it's the same size as that roughly. You could probably put this hard body on the FCX24, that being the Smasher, of course. This thing, I don't know. It was a good first try by Rock Hobby. It's alright. This thing desperately needs a 2-speed gearbox. If I could only combine that and that somehow. And hey presto, it's been done. Let's take a look at it. Tell me this isn't a fabulous looking car. Like seriously, how good is that? And you know what I love about this? That the back can just come off. Let's take a look at the FMS FCX24. Isn't she a beauty? I was so impressed with the Smasher. This is the V2. We reviewed that recently. That as soon as this thing was available in Australia, the FCX24, I jumped on it. Indeed, I jumped on it before it was available in Australia because I've just received this direct from China because I couldn't get it through FMS. They're only selling to Canada and USA at the moment. The good thing about buying from there though is that I did manage to get some other interesting goodies. So that's the included extras for the pre-sale. You also get some license plate stickers, and they've already taken the Texas ones off for the front and rear. They're slightly different sizes. Same O-rings and shims as what came with the Smasher, which means you can oil fill this thing, which, I mean, that reminds me of The Simpsons when the doctor's testing Homer's belly and he goes, "Nose, cancel my 3 o'clock. Oh dear. That's probably going to want some oil. Although it is kind of cool like that. Spacers to raise your body height, because they are nice soft springs, and we've got some screws to fit these little accessories. The standard these days, little USB charger, it's a 2S 1 amp charger, and a little box wrench for your wheels and whatnot. One of my favorite things about this is that you can when you turn it on, you can double tap reverse to get into programming mode, or double tap bind. There are 2 different programming modes. There's drag brake, which is 25, 50, 75 and 100 you can set. And you can also set, when you double tap bind, you can set whether it's forward and reverse or forward brake reverse. So I'm going to keep this as forward brake reverse for trailing. I like that. As far as the crawler goes, out of the box, it's very top heavy, and it's rolled so much. I was trying to get some nice glamour shots, but I figure I'll talk instead right now. It really lifts the wheel, so you can see right here, that back wheel just lifts right up. It settles again. Oh, there she goes. Oh dear. So this poor body's just struggling. It really rolls a lot. I've driven 6 meters so far, and I think it's spent about half that time on its wheels, and I've just backed into a big spider web. Oh, I don't know if that came with a free spider or not. Australia's all about value, often it does. Right. So ascending can be a challenge. When it's not so steep though, it's not so bad. Look at that body roll. I mean, that is realistic at least. It just wants better damping. It could use better damping. Plenty of torque in the stock motor. I think the bigger motor will be better, but the stock one's fine. I do have a better 1/18 scale here for ascending and descending, even in its stock form. That's Mr. TRX4 here. But this is still a lot of fun. Now the other difference, even though underneath these 2 guys are the same, obviously the other difference is these gigantic wheels are gone. So now we're dealing with actual proper crawling wheels. They're bead locked, but I noticed even though they're bead locked, they still slide around the wheel. So the bead lock screws are in the back. There are 4 of them. There are foams inside, and these are similar. I'm actually running Cooper ST Maxes right now, but I used to have STTs on my 80 series. These are the STT Pros, which were a more recent tread design from Cooper, licensed, which is beautiful, and there's fairly firm foam in there as well. So these are going to be good all-rounders, but a little dab of super glue, even just like 2 or 3 dots on the inside of each tire, will stop it from sliding around on the rim. They're not coming out at all. They are vented, so we need to be aware of that for water. Now, one of the big draws of this car is its scale. Have a go at this. So the TRX4M and the Smasher. Note the difference or similarities. This is slightly shorter, the wheelbase. It weighs quite a bit less, being that it's currently just all stock, whereas this thing's been all kitted out with metal and brass and bits and pieces. But one thing that I wish the Traxxas came with, that the FMS does come with, is this slick little 2-speed transmission. Now, there are plastic gears in the servo there that does the first and second gear. It's a metal geared servo and the whole thing's waterproof. As for an out-of-the-box driving experience, oh boy, I already know this is going to be a great car. I can't wait to try it. And we've come here today to a wet, muddy place because we're going to test it out. Now, there's another difference I note underneath this thing that they've made over the previous 24, and that is the body tabs are now black instead of being white, which is great. It's a lot more stealth. I don't really like that there's white plastic there. It really sticks out. It takes me back to the 80s Tamiya plastics. Being black, it's much more stealth, so you wouldn't know till you actually press it in that it's there unless you're looking for it. Now, this is a hard body truck, but it's not hugely hard bodied. It's fairly thin, but I think it will be durable. One nice thing about being hard body is that you can start to play with options, and as you can see on the box art here, you can take that whole back canopy off, which is white on that color scheme. You can take it off and fit those included bar and lights. And I kind of have buyer's remorse, so I kind of wish I'd bought that one, but I'm happy to have the black, and my friend Adam is getting the orange one. So we're going to pop this rear off, I think. I think that's going to look pretty sweet. They'll have painted the tray out, so that's quite complete, and there's a rear. Yeah, so the cab has a rear in it. So once you remove that canopy, you still have a complete looking vehicle, which is brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. While we're talking about interiors, the motor on this guy is a little shorter. He's a 130 instead of a 180 on the Traxxas, so it's an extra 5 mil in length, which gives you a more torquey but slightly less revvy motor. So while we're going to do some upgrades with this thing, I thought today I'm just going to run it. I mean, look where we are. What a fabulous place. And we've got some mud. This thing's been absolutely waterlogged and mudded. And you wouldn't know it because you can clean them up and they come up pretty good. And one thing I like about FMS, among so many others these days, this current trend of doing everything waterproof, Yeah, that's great. So the other, oh, look, there's another difference I see. This is a much better battery strap. Okay, it's still pretty stretchy and thin. Not as thick as the TRX4M one, but it's so much better than the little piddly little rubber band they used on the other models here. So that's great, and it's the same 380mm 2S battery that the others have come with. So honestly, that's very nice. I like this all-in-one receiver ESC BEC. It's a 5V 1A BEC, that's battery eliminator circuit. That's the thing that feeds your servos and whatever else. So there are 2 servos to feed on this thing, and it obviously receives the radio signals and it gives the power to the motor. Only the larger scale FMS and some of the rock hobby stuff has this level of interior. I think that must be difficult to manufacture, but boy oh boy, they did that well. Now look at the track width, incidentally. Having the body off just shows you how wide it is. It's wider than the stock TRX4 track. Not by a lot, but by a little. How you going? Yeah, good man. Hey dogs. So one thing that's really nice about this is that you have so much choice these days. More choice than we've ever had. And I remember, what, 30 years ago I used to dream about stuff like this today. So I think this might be one of my new favorite little machines. Well, I wouldn't have done that for just anyone. Luckily you're watching. This thing's now been fully submarined. It kind of hurt to do because it's a beautiful thing, but it does say it's waterproof. And I made sure to get nice and stuck down in that little puddle down there, so that we actually had to switch gears while we were underwater. So there is absolutely going to be water through everything. The system didn't skip a beat. I was paying close attention. The throttle stayed on, the steering stayed on. Well, it's the next day. And last night, I took this thing apart, dried it out. It didn't take much drying out. And I replaced the motor. And I found that my shifting servo wasn't working last night. I think it might have been wet. I think it did get some water ingress because this thing really did submarine. Anyway, it's dried out and it's working now. And I put the new bumper on. I've taken the canopy off and I've put the rear bars on. Haven't populated the LED light buckets, but that's what I've done. Now the other thing I did was I took the spacers out and I've really stiffened up the rear. I've just put 2 pairs of the fat ones on each, so each spring now has 2 of the fat spacers. The front is actually a lot softer than the rear, and I'm hoping that'll help support it. I haven't oil filled the shocks. Taking the canopy off was very straightforward. It was just a few screws in the corners, just 4 screws, and then it was 4 screws further in to mount this thing. And this thing's actually held together with screws, unlike the TRX4M, which is just clicked together. This should be quite durable. Now this thing does have quite a lot of scratches after sliding around on its roof yesterday. Even so, it still polishes up all right. So I'm happy with that. Now the bigger motor is a 180 instead of the 130 that it comes with, and it comes with a pretty enormous heatsink. It is ridiculously fast in second, and even in first it's kind of too fast, but we're just going to basically go through the gates just to see how it crawls. I'm interested to see what the motor's like and also what the stiffer rear is like. And you know, there's a bit less weight, not much, but there's a bit less weight in the rear. This isn't first and foremost a rock crawler, so what we're doing here is really a bit outside its design envelope, but it's quite good as it is. I think it would actually be easier to handle with the 130 motor instead of this massive 180. But I mean, it's doing just fine, and the included servo, the stock servo, is absolutely adequate. It is, it's not frustrating to drive. It slides over stuff. Right now it's resting on the bumper, and you can just kind of bulldoze it forward and it just does it. Nothing catches underneath. See underneath there? It's quite a good design, eh? I don't know if I'm going to oil fill these shocks or not. Okay, so it crawls okay. Really where this thing shines is on the trail. I don't know if I recommend the bigger 180 motor that I've stuck in. I'll stick a link to it in the description. It's clearly fast. I rather think this bigger motor will do well in the Smasher, because the open diffs will just help it with stability, because this thing just flips too easily. I'm thinking I might look for a higher turn 180 motor. That might be the right answer for this little car, because you can't change the gearing, it's set, you can't adjust where the motor sits. It crawls okay, but yeah, this thing will really shine on the trails. Honestly, it's not bad. It's not a great crawler. Clearly this is a trail machine. Now, let me show you what second gear is like, because it is ridiculous. Second gear is just silly. Can barely hold full throttle. Oof. So my thoughts about driving this thing, given the weight, you don't need to spend money on it. This thing does have spacers. It came with suspension spacers, remember? I'd be putting a couple of spacers in the rear because it's just too soft in the rear and it needs that support to do what you're trying to do with it if you're crawling with it. If it's going to be a shelf queen, of course, and it's just coming out for little gentle things, yeah, just leave it. But if you're going to actually crawl with it, stiffen up, oh, I should say preload the rear a little bit. The butt needs to be hiked up a little bit, and I think it'll perform better. Its short wheelbase worked against it on some of these ascents and descents, in particular trying to crawl up and out of stuff. There's still water dripping all down. I'm going to have to strip this thing completely, but honestly, it's pretty good. Now, we're in pretty dark times. It feels like winter, even though it's not quite here in Victoria, Australia. It is quite a dark day. It's not even 2 o'clock in the afternoon yet. And I must say, these little orange yellow lights, old school looking lights, they really work on this car. I wish it had tail lights. It doesn't even have buckets. They're just clipped in. I guess if I've got to nitpick, that would be my only criticism. The good news is though, they are plastic inserts, and so you could drill a tiny hole in the hard body itself, like unclip the lights first, and just put like a little 3mm lead in there. And you could even file or sand off the top of that lead so it's already diffusing the light, and then fit it in, and it'll look really nice in there. Maybe stick a resistor on it to make it a bit more dim, and I think that'll work just fine. This would also benefit from some weight, and FMS accessories are available already. You can put weight on this down low. The portal axles work really well. I didn't mention it had portals. Hey, it's got portals. If you're new to the FCX24 platform, this is a fabulous machine. Now, it was on pre-sale for around 146 US. I think they're about 215 Aussie at the moment. I couldn't get them from FMS. I tried and I sent them some messaging as well. This is quite nice for what it is though. I recommend it. I like it. It's one of the better cars available in this scale right now, in my opinion. They're a great car. It just wants to be driven, doesn't it? We might even have a 118 and 124 scale drive day down here in Melbourne. Let's do that, eh guys? Throw me a like if you got something out of this. Thanks for joining me, and I'll catch you next time on RC-TNT. Cheers.